Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You know we love taking these deep dives, and today we're going to be looking at something that I think is pretty important, and I think affects pretty much everyone these days. It's social media and friendship. How has social media changed the way that we think about friendship? How has it changed our friendships themselves?
Right.
And we always like to go deep on these topics. So we actually have some source material. This comes from this text called Pasted Text. And this got some really thought-provoking ideas in here. So I'm excited to kind of dig into this with you.
Yeah, me too.
And just kind of see what we can uncover. So I think a good place to start is, Pasted Text points out right away some of the positive impacts that social media has had on our relationships.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest ones is just this idea of staying connected with people no matter where they are in the world.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's huge. Think about it. Even a couple of decades ago, if you had a friend that moved away, I mean, you were writing letters.
Right.
You were making very expensive long-distance phone calls.
Yeah.
And now we have Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp.
All these different ways to stay connected.
All these ways to stay connected. It's instant.
Instantly.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
What do you think about that? Like how?
Well, I mean, it's like we're in this, it's unprecedented, right?
Totally.
This ability to, even if it's just loosely stay connected with people all over the world, I think that's something that is so unique to our time.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how people in the past even maintained these relationships across any kind of distance. I mean, it must have been so much harder.
Yeah, and I think Pasted Text also talks about how social media has made it easier to find people who share our interests.
Yeah.
Maybe you're really into, I don't know, underwater basket weaving, right?
Right. Exactly.
And you might not have anyone in your immediate circle who shares that interest.
Right.
But then you go online and all of a sudden there's a whole community of people.
A whole community.
Who are just as passionate about underwater basket weaving as you are.
I love that.
It's kind of amazing, right?
It is. And I think it really speaks to, people who are maybe more interested in learning different perspectives and different ways of thinking about things. They can find those people a lot easier through social media than they maybe could have before.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that Pasted Text touches on, which I thought was interesting, is this idea that social media can actually help some people be more social, particularly introverts who might be a little bit more hesitant to put themselves out there in person. But online, there's a little bit of that buffer, right? So they can kind of ease into those social interactions a little bit more.
Yeah, and I would add that it also provides a space for, for a lot of people to kind of practice their social skills.
Oh, interesting.
Before they, maybe before they take it offline. It's almost like a training ground.
Yeah, like a low-stakes environment to kind of try things out.
Yeah.
I like that. And I would say, last but not least, Pasted Text really emphasizes how social media has made it so much easier to organize group events.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day, if you wanted to get a group of friends together, it was phone calls, it was email.
Endless email chain.
Trying
to figure out who could come.
Exactly. And now you just create a Facebook event.
Yeah.
Or you send out a group text.
It's just so much more streamlined.
And it's done. So there's definitely a lot of positives when it comes to social media and friendship.
Absolutely.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the potential downsides, because Pasted Text really delves into that.
Okay. Yeah, it does.
And I think one of the things that I found myself thinking about a lot as I was reading it was this idea of, are we trading real connection for just this illusion of connection? Because we might have hundreds of friends on Facebook, but how many of those people do we actually have meaningful relationships with? What do you think about that?
Well, it makes me think about this idea of Pasted Text calls it superficial connections.
Yeah.
Where you have a lot of friends online, but maybe you don't actually know them that well, or you haven't really had those deep conversations. Are we really getting what we need from those relationships?
It's interesting because Pasted Text also points out this link between increased social media use and decreased face-to-face interaction.
That's a big one.
Which I think is something that we can all probably relate to. When was the last time you went out to dinner with a group of friends and everyone's phones were just completely put away?
Right, or like a whole evening without even looking at your phone.
It's sad, right? It's almost like we've forgotten how to just be present with each other without that distraction.
I think that's a really good point. We're so used to having this constant stimulation that it's almost like we're afraid of boredom, or we're afraid of just sitting with our own thoughts.
Yeah. And I think another big downside that pasted text talks about is this idea of comparison.
Yes.
Everyone is putting their best selves forward on social media.
It's the highlight reel.
It's the highlight reel.
Yeah.
You're only seeing the perfect vacations, the perfect meals, the perfect, family photos.
Yeah. And it's easy to forget that, behind those perfect photos, there's probably a whole lot of messiness and stress.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it's so easy to fall into that trap of comparing our everyday lives to these curated versions of other people's lives and feeling like we're not enough.
Exactly. Like you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
You're not being enough. Your life isn't as exciting or as glamorous. And it can be really damaging.
It can be really damaging to our self-esteem.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about this. A friend of mine recently posted all these pictures from her trip to Hawaii.
Okay.
And I was looking at them, and I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit envious. Like, oh, that looks so amazing. I wish I was there. But she called me a few days later, and she was telling me about how stressful the trip actually was.
Oh, wow.
How the kids were misbehaving, how the flights were delayed, and how she was actually so relieved to be back home. And it was just this reminder that social media doesn't always tell the whole story.
Exactly. We're just seeing this very carefully crafted presentation.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the reality.
But I think tied into that comparison is this idea of FOMO.
Yes.
Fear of missing out, which I think social media definitely exacerbates.
Absolutely.
Because you're constantly seeing what other people are doing, where they're going, who they're with. And it can make you feel like you're not part of the fun.
Like you're missing out on something.
Exactly.
And I think that ties back into that feeling of not being enough. Like, why aren't I at that party?
Yes.
Why wasn't I invited?
Exactly.
Why am I stuck at home?
Exactly. And I think another interesting point that pasted text makes is how social media can actually make it harder to communicate sometimes.
Harder to communicate.
Yeah, because you don't have those nonverbal cues.
That's a good point.
Like facial expressions, body language, tone of voice.
That's all text-based.
Yeah, it's all text-based.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to misinterpret things when you're just reading words on a screen.
I mean, that's why we have emojis now.
Exactly.
We're trying to inject some of that emotion and nonverbal communication back into these text-based interactions.
Yes.
But it's still not the same.
It's not the same. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to have conversations with people where it's like, no, that's not what I meant by that text. Or you're reading way too much into this comment.
Right. It's so easy for things to get lost in translation.
It's so easy. And I think that can lead to misunderstandings, conflict, and even, unfriending and blocking.
Yeah.
Which can feel really intense.
This is intense.
Because it's like this public declaration.
Yeah.
That you're severing ties with someone.
It's like you're shutting them out completely.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's a lot, right?
Yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of ground here. And I think, it's easy to get overwhelmed and think, well, is social media good for our friendships or is it bad? What's the answer here?
I think the answer, like with most things in life, is nuance. It's not black and white. Social media can be both good and bad for friendships. It really depends on how we use it. So I think the key takeaway from pasted text is this idea of balance.
Balance.
We need to find a balance between our online interactions and our offline interactions.
Because both are important.
Both are absolutely essential for building and maintaining healthy relationships.
So what are some things that we can do to kind of find that balance? What are some tips that maybe pasted text gives us?
Well, one thing they talk about is being mindful of how much time you're spending on social media.
Okay.
Is it enhancing your friendships or is it hindering them?
That's a good question to ask yourself because I think sometimes we can get so caught up in just the scrolling, the liking, the commenting, that we forget to actually connect with people on a deeper level.
Yeah, and sometimes that means putting the phone down and having those face-to-face conversations. It means making time for those in-person interactions.
Yes.
And really being present when you're with the people that you care about.
It's so important. And I think, maybe another tip would be to be more intentional about the content that you're consuming on social media.
Oh, that's a good one.
Are you following accounts that make you feel good? Or are you following accounts that make you feel envious and insecure?
Yeah. Are you following people that inspire you? Or are you following people that just make you feel bad about yourself?
Exactly. And I think, at the end of the day, it's really about asking yourself, What does friendship mean to you? And how can you make sure that your online interactions are actually supporting the kinds of friendships that you want to have in your life?
That's such a good question.
So, yeah, I think that's a great place to leave it. I think that's a lot to think about.
It is.
And hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
Yeah.
And some things to kind of mull over as you navigate your own social media use and your own friendships in this digital age.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.